It's just after 8 o'clock. We've had around about 20% of the vote counted. We're starting to get a fairly clear picture of what's going on around the state, Anthony.
Yeah, and I just want to run through the party totals, and this gives us some of the smaller parties as well. Liberals 34, Nationals just under 12, Labor 34, Greens 10.7. Now, Christian Democrats 3.1. It's critical that they get a seat in the upper house for the government. On those lower house figures, you expect Fred Nile to be returned. Interestingly, the No Land Tax party is standing in every seat. They've got 1.9% in the lower house. They've got column A in the upper house. If that's repeated in the upper house, with the advantage of column A, there's an opportunity for the No Land Tax party to get elected. That's a long way down the track, but I just thought I'd point that out from the early figures. I just want to run through some changing seats. We're saying the Labor Party is gaining Ballina at the moment. The Ballina, the Labor Party has pulled ahead of the Greens into second place. There's a lot more counting. It looks like Labor's gained Blue Mountains and Campbelltown and Granville, Londonderry, Macquarie Fields, which is a notional Liberal seat, but will be won by the Labor Party, was held by the Labor Party. Port Stephens looks like a Labor gain. Strathfield has become a little stronger since I last looked at it. I haven't looked at that in detail. Swansea and Wyong, but that's not nearly enough seats to win government for the Labor Party. So there are seats falling, but not nearly enough to get them close to government. And we've got a number of seats still in doubt at this stage. Coogee, the Liberals are ahead. Those numbers are dropping backwards and forwards between Liberal ahead and Liberal retain. East Hills, the Liberals are ahead. Astonishing figures there in the most marginal government seat. The Liberals are ahead in Gosford, the Labor Party's ahead in Lismore and in Rockdale. They haven't looked in there to see how the Greens are polling, and the Labor Party's ahead in Rockdale and the Entrance. So lots of seats falling, but the size of the government's majority was so large that it's not endangering their re-election.
That's right. And just to remember how large it was, last time around they got 64% of the primary vote, so you always, of the two-party preferred vote, so you're always expecting there was going to be some comeback by there. A comeback of just over 8% for the Labor Party, Carmel, is nowhere near enough to get you anywhere near government, obviously, tonight.
No, that's right. And this election really was never about us being able to take government. There was certainly a rush of blood after Queensland, but our best hopes would be that we have a credible result that puts us within striking distance for 2019. And it looks like that's where we're going. We want our base, our heartland to come back to us, and it's about renewal, new candidates, new people in the party, in the parliament, and I think we will see that. We've got some very good candidates who will be returned, who will be in the parliament. I mean, David Harris just has run an excellent campaign, local principle, really a lot to offer to the parliament. It's great to have people like that back.
Sorry.
No, you're right. Were you surprised by any of those seats, Carmel or Gladys?
Not surprised, but I'm not happy to write some of the seats off that were on that list. I think Strathfield's definitely in play, and our scrutinies are telling us that we're holding up quite well. But I have to say, with all due respect to my colleague here, if I was the Labor Party, I'd be disappointed if those percentages continued throughout the night. I would have thought the swing to the Labor Party would have been higher than what we're seeing. It is still early, the vote's still to count, but if that trend continues, I think the Labor Party swing to them tonight is quite underwhelming, given what we anticipated the correction would be tonight. And we are seeing some pockets of resistance in terms of the Liberal vote really holding up. And any extra seat tonight gives us a huge boost for the future.
But Carmel, how many seats did you expect to pick up? You know, I was being told 10 to 15, maybe 13.
Yeah, between 10 and 15 was certainly our expectation. I thought we would get 13. A bit dependent on what happens in the inner city with Newtown and with Balmain, because there's still big question marks over those seats. And we have to remember that in 2007 the Coalition had 35 seats, so they went on to win government with 35 seats in 2007 at the next election. So if we get a result between 30 and 40, that's a good result for Labor.
OK, well, as Carmel Tebbit said, one of the things that the Polls and Wise campaign did was to help to return some of the Labor Party's base to the party. But what it has seen is the loss of some of its elite in the condemnation that's been coming from some of the people who are Labor Party members and have been Labor Party ministers in federal and state governments. Juanita Phillips has one now. She's speaking to Michael Egan, the former Treasurer.
That's right. Thanks, Chris. Also, the state's longest-serving treasurer. Michael Egan, you kicked off the first attempt to privatise electricity in this state in 1997 under Bob Carr. Yep. What do you think of Luke Foley's campaign against it?
Well, I was very disappointed by it. I would have thought the Labor Party had grown up on that issue. For 2 decades now, the Labor Party has been trying to convince itself that it could switch votes, it could convert Tory votes to Labor votes by opposing privatisation. Telstra, for example, on 2 occasions my Labor colleagues told me that we were going to beat John Howard because of the Telstra privatisation. That didn't happen. And so I think in 1997, the fact that we didn't privatise the electricity industry was truly a lost opportunity.
So Mike Baird is right when he says privatising it is good for New South Wales?
Yes, it is, although he certainly exaggerated the benefits. But what you've got to keep in mind is that 40 years ago, it made sense for government to own these utilities because we didn't have a well-developed regulatory system and the private sector couldn't marshal the necessary capital to invest in these utilities. That's not the case now. So there is really no sensible reason to retain them in public ownership.
So what's Labor going to do? Obviously, the government looks like it's on track to win. Mike Baird will get his mandate to privatise. Yes. What are they going to do in the upper house? They're going to block it?
Well, Mr Foley is saying that, but I think he should take a couple of weeks to reflect because the government will clearly have a mandate and privatisation was a central issue of the campaign. It can't be argued that they don't have that mandate. And I think the Labor Party has to look long term. Labor parties should never, oppositions generally, should never try to govern from the upper house. Labor will be back in government one day. Luke Foley could well be the Premier of New South Wales. He doesn't want an upper house that doesn't accept a government's mandate.
All right, we are getting some early results in and seeing Labor picking up some of the seats it lost last time. I want to ask you about the Abbott factor. That was cited as a big factor in Victoria and Queensland. Has it been as much at play here?
Look, I think it is a factor, but not in the way that people think. Most people assume that Abbott was a negative for Baird, but what was uppermost in people's minds was not the Abbott-Baird connection, but the Abbott-Baird comparison. And I think Abbott's faults, in most people's minds, just magnified what they saw as Baird's virtues. Abbott is confrontational, he's aggressive, he's a political warrior. He's overly partisan. Mike Baird's none of those things. He's measured, he's inclusive, he gives the impression that he'd prefer not to be involved in all the political warfare. And I think people like that. So if I were the Liberals in Canberra tonight, I wouldn't be taking any comfort in this result. I'd be saying, how can we get Tony Abbott to be a different person? And I don't think they can.
Michael Egan, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Okay, well, let's just go now to Lidcombe, where we're expecting sometime later this evening to see Luke Foley, the opposition leader, in that very room. It's looking all a bit subdued at the moment. I imagine there are mix of emotions, still early in the evening, but it seems that there's no likelihood that you would see a Labor government form this evening. The question is, have they done well enough in their own minds? And that will depend on who they are. Now, there was someone in our office in Parliament House the other day, a federal figure who thought 17 seats was around about the area that they thought they might lob. Well, it doesn't look like being that at the moment, Anthony.
No, let's have a look at the primary vote, the first preference vote securing the section, 35.2 for the Liberals, 9.8 for the Nationals, so that's around 45%. 34.7 for Labor, 10.5 for the Greens, 9.7 for others. If we look at the change in vote, Liberals down 3.4, Nats down 2.7, Labor up 9, Greens roughly the same, others down. I'll have a quick look at the two-party preferred. It's a 10% swing at this stage. So there's that double-digit swing, but from a very low base at the last election for the Labor Party. And what we'll look at now is the chamber. Let's fill it in for the seats we're definitely giving away to one side or the other. We're giving the Liberal Party and the coalition a definite 36 Liberals, 16 Nationals, 32 Labor, 2 Greens and 2 others. Now, there's a bit of umming and ahhing about the Green figure because they could yet win Lismore, although we're not factoring in that yet. They're currently I think they're currently ahead, but we can't judge that reliably. That's the one. I just hit the same button again. There we go. And the likelies, we're giving a few more away 36-16, one more seat for Labor. So it's definitely the government's back. I'll do a prediction next time we have a look at this, but the government's definitely back. They're looking like about 55 seats.
Yeah, and just on those figures too, it's time too for the Greens to start converting, talk into seats, and quite often we hear that they've done very well at elections, but in fact they don't pick up that many seats. So 2 seats would be a good result, 3 seats would be outstanding for them.
Yeah, and we've got the changing seats again. I think Ballina, I'll bring up this list and run through it. The difficulty is I don't have time to look at every individual seat, and some of these pop in and out. Blue Mountains, it looks like Labor game, Campbelltown, Granville, Londonderry. So all the more, Quarryfields, Maitland, all the more obvious seats that used to be Labor are going back to Labor, with a couple of notable exceptions. 2 marginal seats that aren't on that list are, of course, East Hills and Oatley, and they're not on the changing seats list, and that's critical to the result. If I look at the seats in doubt, I've got East Hills with the Liberal Party ahead, and Oatley, which I'll come to in a couple of minutes, we've got the Liberal Party retaining it. Without Kevin Green's personal popularity for the Labor Party at the last election, it looks like the Liberal Party's held that seat relatively easily.
OK, and a seat that's interesting Gladys a lot is Strathfield, because she's mentioned it several times now.
No, indeed, I'm not happy to concede Strathfield yet. I think our scrutineers are telling us we're holding up well and we're in with a shot. So that's one of those seats that will go down to the wire, and it could take some days before we have a result in Strathfield. But so far, what we're looking at very closely in that seat are what's happening with the Green preferences. So our primary vote is holding up very well in Strathfield, but again, it's the rate of exhaustion of those Green preferences or otherwise that will really determine who holds the seat of Strathfield. And can I just say to Charles Casaselli and his team out there, they've done a phenomenal job. I was out there at pre-poll a few times, and it was a hot contest. And I think the Labor Party has actually withdrawn a lot of resources from some seats and thrown everything into Strathfield. They're pushing really hard for that, and we're holding really well.
What are you getting on Strathfield?
Well, some early figures that was saying we were doing well, but very early figures. I haven't had anything since then, so I agree, too early to call. It's a tight contest there. Jodie McKay's a great candidate. It will be great to see her back in Parliament, but just too soon.
And Gladys is right in the sense that the Labor Party have put a lot of effort into Strathfield. We saw at the campaign launch, Jodie McKay introduced Luke Foley. She's sort of seen as the hero that came out of ICAC unscathed. And I remember when she came out of ICAC and she said she'll never run for Parliament again. And then here she is. Who convinced her to run for Strathfield?
Well, Jodie herself has said that when she had some time to reflect, and she is one of very few people to come out of ICAC looking better than when they went in, and all credit to her. But she herself has said that when she had some time to reflect, she realised that she wanted to be back in Parliament trying to make change from within and doing it via the Labor Party.
And Carmel, do you have any words on those contests in Balmain and in Newtown, which you would be watching very closely?
I am, and too early. Not doing as well in Newtown at this stage as what we had hoped, but the Newtown booths have been counted, and they were always going to be the tougher ones for us. We need to see what happens in the rest of the seat where we've got a stronger vote. OK, well, we have been talking a little bit about those seats of Strathfield and Oatley, and we'll find out a little bit more about them when we look at the inner city.
Yes, and let's first look at Sydney, and that's held by Alex Greenwich, who's an independent, and he won that after Clover Moore resigned from that seat. And Anthony, that seat's changed a bit. The profile of it's changed with the redistribution.
Well, yes, now doesn't extend very far into Surrey Hills at all. There's a huge population growth of apartments in the CBD and in Pyrmont, and it's really changed that electorate. Alex Greenwich got 42% of the first preference vote. That's an excellent result. I don't think Clover Moore only got above 40% once or twice, and she was much better known. So that's a very impressive result for him, Sir Alex Greenwich. Patrice Pandelos is finishing second. Labor's back in third place on just under 12%. So that's a very impressive win for Alex Greenwich, who's back in the Parliament as a member for Sydney.
And if we look at Coogee, now this was a seat that earlier in the campaign Labor was hoping to win back with Paul Pearce, but how's it looking for the Liberals' Bruce Notley-Smith?
Bruce Notley-Smith is polling very well here. I think I mentioned earlier in the evening, this is one of those seats where you look at the land values, you wonder why it was stayed in the Labor hands for so long. It's Bruce Notley-Smith, very well known in the district, former mayor of Randwick, ran a high-profile campaign last time, high-profile campaign this time. At this stage, we've got 15 of the 29 booths counted, and the swing is about 6%. And so on our numbers, he will go on to win that seat. Again, you always want to wait and see all the numbers coming in, but they're they look like they're very strong for him. And Bruce Notley-Smith looks like he's held Coogee.
And we've been talking about Strathfield. Of course, it is held by Charles Cassicelli, and Gladys is almost convinced that he might hang on, or we shouldn't say that just yet. What are your figures showing on Strathfield?
My figures are an unreliable collection of booths. We've got 2 booths from Ashfield, which are outside of a 3rd booth from Ashfield, which is outside of the district. So they're not very reliable. Cassicelli's ahead there. He needs to be more than 2% ahead, with 8% there with the Greens. And at this stage, there's a 10% swing, and the Labor Party's predicted to gain. Again, I'm not convinced they've got the greatest collection of booths. There's another 27 to be counted, so there's a lot more counting to come. But certainly, 10% swing, that's a statewide swing. The Labor Party needed to be going beyond that to win this election, and they may win Strathfield, but they may not win the election. They certainly won't win the election.
And further south in the seat of Oatley, now this is held by Mark Courret, and Mike Baird was campaigning in the seat of Oatley today. We saw him holding Mark Courret's 1-year-old baby boy, James.
And he's had a very impressive result here against Aubrey Smith. He's got 51% of the first preference votes, the Labor's 36. Phenomenal. The Greens have got 7.6. We've got preference counts from 10 of the 28 booths, a third of the booths, and it's showing a 4.2% swing to the Liberal Party. So that's one of the best results for the Liberal Party in the state at this election. And I'd say that Mark Courret is definitely going to return as a member for Oakley.
So it's 8:15. We've seen 28% of the vote counted. It looks very much like the government has been returned, and I know that Gladys Berejiklian is very impressed with some of the results that she's just been watching.
I say hooray for Courret, not only to hold the position, but absolutely...
Did you just think of that then?
No, we actually say that to him all the time, so I have to confess to not thinking of it on the spot. But not only to hold on, but to actually get a swing to him under these circumstances is phenomenal. So Mark and your team, if you're watching, congratulations to date. I'm happy to predict you're going to hold on to your seat with a very strong showing under what have been very difficult circumstances.
All right, well, let's go down to the St George district now to take a look at something that's whatever's going on in Rockdale, Bridget.
And that's right. And Steve Camper, the ALP candidate in Rockdale, is standing by. We'll cross to him in a moment. Anthony, let's have a look at Rockdale and how it's going this evening. Well,
this is one of the surprise results of the last election when the Liberal Party won it. John Flowers won it. Frank Sartor held the seat previously. He didn't contest the last election. Let's just say that the Liberal Party hadn't won this seat previously since 1927, so that was quite a result last time. Though they almost defeated Barry Unsworth at a by-election there in 1986. Anyway, Steve Camper was the candidate at the last election, the defeated candidate. This time he's almost certainly the successful candidate. There's a swing of 6.2% on a good number of booths coming in. He's ahead on the first preferences, the Labor candidate, and so Steve Camper will be the new Labor member for Rockdale, returning it to the party fold.
And Steve Camper joins us now. What do you think about that? Could you just hear what Anthony was saying?
Oh, look, we're growing in confidence, but it's still early days yet, Bridget. Still early days.
Well, Anthony thinks you've got it. Yeah, I think you're being modest, as Gladys Berejiklian just said here. You're being modest. I think she thinks that you're going to win.
Well, look, as I said, we're confident, but let's let the numbers roll over a little bit longer.
And if you do get up, what has been part of your campaign? Why do you think you've been successful? Is it just a swing back, a correction?
I think it's a number of things. I think the electricity sell-off, I think that's been a major issue. Also, the fact that we've campaigned very hard here for over 12 months, more than door-knocked the electorate on one occasion, and I connected with the community. I think the fact that I've been here all my life and people understand what I stand for, and I think that's going a long way. But there's also issues like the TAFE cuts. You know, they're things that the community's not happy with, aren't happy with.
And how much has the TAFE cuts been brought up with you throughout the campaign?
Oh, that was quite prominent, especially over the last 60 days of campaigning.
And Rockdale's always been a safe Labor seat. Have you seen a lot of change in the seat?
There has been change over the years, but I'd say the electorate has become, look, it's a little bit more affluent over the years, and it means that we've, the nature of voter may have changed to some degree.
And when do you think you're going to be able to relax and feel confident that you might have this seat?
Let's see, next 30 minutes or so. Let's see how we go.
All right.
Yeah.
Steve Campbell, you look quite nervous. You look like you might need a drink at the end of this.
I need a few drinks. We haven't slept too much over the last few weeks.
People are just exhausted.
We can relate to
especially
that.
last night.
Yeah, I can relate to it, and so can Gladys and Carmel. Steve Campbell, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alas, looks like we went to him 30 minutes too early and he's chewed his fingernails down to the quick, I think, watching that particular race.
He looked very nervous, didn't he?
He looked very nervous indeed. Now, we have been talking quite a lot about East Hills this evening. If you look at the electoral pendulum, that was a seat that's held just 0.2 by the Liberal Party. You would imagine that would be the first seat to fall, and we'll get a little bit of a look at it in the next run of seats, Bridget.
Yes, East Hills, as you mentioned, it's held by Glenn Brooks, and he's the Liberal candidate. Cameron Murphy is the ALP candidate up against him. Anthony, what's the latest showing there? Because it is close.
Well, this is quite a turn-up. That a seat that had never been won by the Liberal Party all the way back to 1953 when it was first created. It is in the federal seat of Banks, which fell to the Liberal Party for the first time in 2013. So this is an interesting pointer for the future. But Glenn Brooks, 46.3, Cameron Murphy, 39.8. We're seeing a small swing to the Liberal Party. I've got 6 polling places counted, so that's looking like a bit of a trend there at this stage. We're saying Glenn Brooks is leading. We're not giving the seat away yet, but for that seat not to be falling is quite an extraordinary result.
And let's go to Canterbury, of course held by Linda Burney, who's the Deputy Leader of the New South Wales Labor Party, a safe Labor seat. Will that remain the case?
That's been held very easily by the Labor Party. It's a very safe seat. This is one of the seats that goes all the way back to 1856, I think. It's one of the oldest seats in the state, and it's been Labor held for many, many decades. Linda Burney has held it since 2003. She's the Deputy Labor Leader, and you can see that she had a 6.7% swing to her, and it's returned to its more usual double-digit margin. Linda Burney's back in the Parliament.
And another safe Labor seat is Lakemba, and that was held by Robert Fiorello, who is retiring. And the candidate is Jihad Dib, and he's a very high-profile candidate. He was principal of Punchbowl Boys High and seems well-liked. How's he placed tonight? Yes,
and when Maurice Yemma used to hold this seat, he had a margin up above 30%. He had an extraordinary margin in the 2007 election. Jihad Dib's taken over as the Labor candidate, and he's had a very enormous result there, 57.6. 14% with the Christian Democrats. I don't know that candidate, but to get 14% for a Christian Democrat, they must be well known or something in that district. I just don't know them well enough. But Jihad Dib easily won the seat. He's got a swing of 11.3%, and he's the new member for Lakemba in the Parliament.
And let's also go to Bankstown, where Tanya Mihaluk, she has that seat, a safe Labor seat also.
Yeah, and she will be safely returned in that seat. Let's just say that if seats survived the onslaught in 2011, there was always going to be retained by the Labor Party at this election. So the swing is only 4.8%, and at this stage, it's still a very safe seat. So Tanya Mihaluk's been returned as the member for Bankstown.
Okay, Anthony, would I be right in saying that East Hills is the only swing to the Liberal Party that we've seen in any of the seats this year?
Makure.
Okay, so there are two.
Miranda.
Okay. Well, Miranda's depending on how you measure it. There's also, I think, Monero sort of not showing much signs of swinging. So there are these seats like that. But in the case of, certainly in the case of Oakley, it's, I think, the removal of the former Labor member who was extremely popular, Kevin Green. But East Hills is quite dramatic, yes.
East Hills would be an extraordinary result.
Absolutely, East Hills would be an extraordinary result, as would Oatley, and I'm hearing from our scrutineers that a seat like Kiama in the Illawarra is actually having a swing to us as well. Gareth Ward is a very hard-working local member down there, and we actually are seeing some seats where, very surprisingly and miraculously, there is a swing to the government, because in this context we did expect a correction from the result 4 years ago. So the fact that some of these local members on the ground are seeing swings to them is a good testament to them.
And Carmel, looking at some of the positives for the Labor Party, personnel is going to be very important when you go into a new parliament. Jihad Dib will be a great acquisition for you.
Certainly will be. Someone who's very respected in the community, very successful principal, put in place some really innovative practices at Punchbowl Boys, turned the school around, and he will bring a lot to the Parliament.
I was in Lakemba one day. I was doing a profile early on in the campaign with Luke Foley, and he was doing a street walk with Jihad Dib. And for someone who hasn't been a politician, he was hugely popular and very at ease, much like Mike Baird in that sense of just has a natural presence with people. Lots of the school children coming up to him and saying hello, and he was certainly natural, and you could see that he was very sort of happy to be there. And at one stage we were filming the profile on Luke Foley when he wasn't known, and there was sort of this feeling with the camera woman and I saying, the profile's on Luke, not on Jihad, you know. It was sort of...
But that's still very important to the community.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think there's enormous gratitude in the community to Jihad Dib for what he's been able to achieve at that school, and he'll be a huge asset.
All right, well now the next run of seats are just described as interesting by Anthony. Why are they interesting, Anthony?
Well, let's first have a look at Seven Hills, I should say. Now, Seven Hills is the new seat. It was replacing Toongabbie, which of course was held by Labor's Nathan Rees. But why is Seven Hills interesting, as Chris said, Anthony?
These were the seats on 8 to 10%. If the Labor Party was going to win, they needed to dislodge seats like Coogee, Kiama, Holsworthy, Seven Hills. We just done Coogee. Here's Seven Hills. It's the new seat. It's got a swing, a margin of 8%, and basically there's no swing going on here. Labor, Suzanne Benjamin, who's Blacktown City Councillor, and Mark Taylor, who's from the Hillshire Council, lawyer and a police... let me see, yes, works for the police prosecution branch. He's no swing at all in that electorate. It's a peculiar electorate. It includes Winston Hills and Seven Hills. So it's got some really solid Liberal areas and some really solid Labor areas. And the swing is quite consistent. And Mark Taylor is the Liberal member for Seven Hills. It existed once in the 1980s and was a Labor seat. Well, now it's a Liberal seat.
And let's have a look at Holsworthy, and it's held by Melanie Gibbons, a Liberal seat. She's held Menai since 2011. It was Menai. It's now been renamed Holsworthy. How's she looking?
Well, Menai was squeezed west. There isn't enough room for 4 Sutherland Shire seats anymore, and Holsworthy was shifted substantially west, crosses the Georges River, south of Liverpool. And on those numbers, Melanie Gibbons' vote is very strong. We're seeing a swing of 6%, but the margin is 10. Now, I don't think on the numbers I've got here we've got anything from west of the Georges River yet, but I think it's a bit late for those to be turning the figures around. At this stage, with a good smattering of polling places in and with that first preference vote, it looks like Melanie Gibbons should hold that seat.
And to Kiama, and Gareth Ward, the Liberal, he won that at the last election. How is that looking? He's the Deputy Government Whip. Is he going to retain Kiama?
Yes, he's going to retain that seat. We've got more than a third of the vote count. We've got a good smattering of two-party preferreds. Gareth Ward's on 52.6 when we factor in the preferences and where the information is from. And we've got many Nara booths. At stage 1 of the Kiama booths, there's a 1.4% swing to the Liberal Party. So Gareth Ward will easily retain Kiama.
Yes, as we got the word from the lips of our Liberal Party panel member before that she thought that there was a swing in Kiama. Gladys, you were right.
It's good to know I got something right. No, absolutely. We're really, well, to date, we're thrilled with some of the results we're seeing. You know, there is still a lot of counting to go, but, you know, the fact that Oatley, East Hills, Seven Hills, Kiama, bucking the trend, and even in areas like Drummoyne, where I'm hearing from our scrutineers that local member in that seat, John Sidoti, is actually having a bit of a swing to him. So it's interesting to see that in some areas we're actually seeing swings to the government, which we hadn't anticipated. But again, there are a number of seats in doubt, which I'd like to see us cast a bit more doubt over in terms of where they might fall. I'm hoping we might keep some of those seats that are on that list for doubtful, but so far I'm pleasantly surprised with the result. I hadn't anticipated that we'd hold on to some of these areas quite as well as we have, and so again early on, but it's not looking too bad for us.
And Carmel, what are some of the seats that are interesting you?
Well, I think just to go to some of those seats that we've just been talking about, it does show the benefit of incumbency and strong candidates who've campaigned well on the ground. And certainly we're seeing that in some of those seats that the Coalition have held. Still looking very closely at what's happening in the inner city, and haven't got any clear results there, but Newtown's not trending as well as we'd hope, and that will be a big disappointment for Penny Sharp and for Labor. We would like to see her in the lower house. Blue Mountain's strong for us. I think that we'll get Blue Mountains. Wyong, we've already seen that we've got that, and we're still showing that we're doing well in Ballina, so that's still very much in play.
Okay. Sorry.
You were confident reasonably confident, the internal polling was showing that you might win Newtown, because Penny Sharp's been a strong candidate.
It was always going to be difficult. I mean, on paper, it's a 4.5% Green seat, so it was always a hard one for Labor, and of course the fact that it's a new seat meant that we didn't really have a good sense of how it would come together. But Penny Sharp was a very strong candidate. She's run a fantastic campaign. A huge amount of door-knocking, phoning effort has gone into that seat, so let's still wait, but it's not looking as good as what we thought it might at this stage of the night.
Okay, well, Carmel Tibbett mentioned Ballina. Let's go just about as far north as you can in New South Wales, save, of course, for the Tweed, Bridget.
Yes, let's look at Ballina. And, of course, it's held by the Nats' Don Page, and he's retiring after 27 years. And so Chris Beavis is running in that seat, but it's one that either the ALP and the Greens would like to pick up. Certainly, we've talked about it a bit. How's it going, Anthony?
Well, Don Page is retiring, and clearly the Nationals have lost a big personal vote, 25% down. I want to stay on this graphic before I move on to the two-party preferred. The Greens are in second place, they're on 30. The Labor Party's on 25. The big Ballina booths are yet to come in, and that's not the Green end of the electorate. So at the moment, we're getting a feed from the Electoral Commission of National versus Labor. And on the next graphic, that's the one we're using to make a prediction of Labor gain. Now, I can reject the Electoral Commission's data, which is an actual preference count, and go to an estimate. I'm not prepared to do it at this stage, because until those Ballina booths comes in, it's not clear the order candidate's finished. So I had someone tweeting me saying, "Why have you got the counts around the wrong way?" That's the official count I'm using. Later in the night, I'll reconsider that. But for the moment, I think the Nationals have definitely lost Ballina at this stage. If the count goes as predicted there, the Labor Party wins it. If not, the Greens win it. And Lismore, just to say, Lismore next door's got exactly the same position.
OK, well, let's take a look now at Granville. Now, Granville has always been a safe Labor seat. In the last election in 2011, Tony Issa was elected. He's a former long-time Parramatta City councillor. How's Granville looking?
Well, before 2011, the last time the Liberals won Granville, Jack Lang was the opposition leader, so that's how long ago it was last Liberal seat. On the numbers we're seeing at the moment, Julia Finn's well ahead of Tony Issa, and I think this was always an expected result. A substantial 10% vote there for the Christian Democrats as well, which they're not, I can't remember what they're doing, their preferences in that seat, but the preference count we're getting is very solid, and there is an 8.5% swing. Julia Finn, who's on Parramatta City Council and was the youngest female mayor of the council several years back, youngest ever. She is the new member for Granville.
We'll be crossing to Granville soon as well. Let's have a look at Campbelltown, one of those seats that you thought was going to be close. Is it still? How's it looking for Brian Doyle or Greg Warren?
No, this is definitely a Labor gain. The Labor Party's got over 50% of the first preference vote and continue to have more than 50%. This is a seat. The swing is, when we see on the next graphic, the swing's something like 14%, which is twice what was needed. So that has easily gone back to the Labor Party. This inherited a lot of booths from Wallandilly, which was lost at the last election, but I suspect the Labor Party didn't campaign very well in the Wallandilly end at the southern part of Campbelltown, and I think we're seeing some of that vote come back this time, and that's why the swing is larger, quite large there, but it's not a natural Liberal seat. Greg Warren is the Labor member now.
And how's things looking in Prospect? That used to be the seat of Smithfield. Andrew Rowan, the Liberal there since 2011. What's happening there?
The prospects are that Andrew Rowan will become another oncer. It was quite an upset for him to win Smithfield, the first Liberal MP for the seat. Hugh McDermott is the new Labor candidate. He's ahead on first preferences. Very solid vote there. And the swing is 4.9. Again, if the Labor Party were going to win this election, they needed swings of bigger than 4.9 in seats like that. They've had to battle to win that seat. They've had to battle to win some of those seats. And East Hills is the classic example of that. Now, the one thing I wanted to throw up is Wollongong. If I can get down to Wollongong. Let's see if I can get my map down to Wollongong. Come on, behave for me. Nope. Here we go. I want to go to Wollongong because I think the figures... No, it's not going to do it for me. I need to go to Wollongong. That one.
It can't hear you.
No, that one there. Let's look at it. This is a big story.
It's a recalcitrant.
Arthur Rorris is now in second place in that electorate. He's the independent that's challenging Noreen Hay. Now, votes got up to 45%, but once he's in second place, there's a lot more counting to come. But if those orders finish like that and the Labor vote drops at all from this point, that's the seat we'll be watching. We won't know the result on that if it's close, but Noreen Hay needs to keep her first preference vote at that level.
OK, well, it's coming up to 20 to 9. We've had 37.7% of the vote counted, and it looks very much with only about a 9% swing to the Labor Party, as though that's nowhere near enough for a change of government this evening. Now, he certainly doesn't think that is going to be the case. And standing by with Juanita Phillips is Catherine Cusack from the Liberal Party, its upper house.
Thanks for that, Chris. Catherine Cusack, I'll get your take on the results shortly. First, I want to talk to you about women in Parliament, or the lack of them. That's an issue that you're very proactive on.
Yes, thanks, Juanita. Look, I am a member of the government, but I have another hat as chair of the Women Parliamentarians nationally. New South Wales, unfortunately, has the lowest performance of any of the states. Only 21% of our representation is women. And an astonishing 55 seats out of 93 have never had a female representative in New South Wales.
And the Conservative Party's particularly bad on this issue.
I think both sides of politics would like to be lifting their games in both houses of Parliament, but in particular in the Legislative Assembly.
Well, what do you make of retiring Liberal MP Charlie Lynn? He had a real go at party power brokers this week. He says he won't be voting Liberal in the upper house because they haven't put forward one woman in a winnable position. He's called them misogynistic. What do you think?
Look, I think in terms of New South Wales politics, it's the oldest parliament, and we have real cultural issues that everyone on all sides have to. I think Charlie is pointing the finger at the pre-selection process, and that's the pipeline into Parliament. And again, I think he's correct in the sense that if we're going to get improvement, we're going to have to ask the parties to give women more of a go in those seats, because I think as this election is showing, where you do give women a fair shot, they are bringing in the seats tonight.
They do perform well. Well, those stats might be improving tonight. Which seats have we been seeing that could go to first-time women MPs tonight?
Yeah, seats like Strathfield has not... Strathfield has been. Virginia Judge held that. But Miranda will be one.
Port Stephens.
Port Stephens. Very exciting to have Oxley, Melinda Pavey, the National Party, bringing that in, the first time in the far north of New South Wales that we've ever had a female representative.
Holsworthy?
Holsworthy with Mel Gibbons, yeah. So the Conservatives are in front in a number of those seats, and I know that Labor have put women into some good seats as well. So
OK, well, leaving that aside, just quickly, you're from the Ballina area.
Yes.
That's been a really interesting area to watch tonight, hasn't it? Looks like Labor is picking up those seats from old National Party strongholds.
Yeah, look, there's been a huge, a really big scare campaign, both by Labor and the Greens, up on the far north coast, and it's actually been going on for some years now. We have a different media market up there, and we also have a much more urbanised population. So I suppose I would say a much more progressive part for rural New South Wales, and a retiring member, very popular in Don Page.
But surely there's some lessons on CSG for your side up there?
Look, we've done a lot on CSG, but perhaps we left it too late, would be my suggestion. I think some of the initiatives we've taken would have been more credible and effective had they been done earlier.
Catherine Cusack, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Anita.
You're watching New South Wales Votes, coming to you live from the ABC's Election Centre in Ultimo, and we're saying that Mike Baird has been returned as Premier of New South Wales. And Anthony Green, can you tell us how he's done it?
Yes, well, let's have a look at the first preference votes again. 35.5, 10.2, so that's over 45, nearly 46%, 34.4 for Labor, 10.5 for the Greens, 9.4 for others. If we look at the change in vote that's occurring, down 3, down 2, up 8.8. So there's been a return of the Labor vote, but not much loss from the Liberal Party vote. And if we look at the two-party preferred swing is at 9.6 at the moment. If we look at the chamber, I'll draw the seats which are definitely being given away at this stage. We're giving away, across the bottom, 36 and 16, 33 for Labor, 2 Greens and 2 others. There is a bit of argy-bargy about the Greens and Labor in some of those seats up in the far north coast, Ballina and Lismore. We're working on the National versus Labor vote tonight. Later on we'll assess what we do with those numbers. Here's the prediction, the first time we're going to make a prediction, 37-16, coalition majority of 15. So it's a very comfortable working. That's about the same size as I think Morris Yema's majority in 2007. So it's a perfectly workable majority and allows you to survive unfortunate by-elections and the like.
Certainly there are some who would say, Anthony, that a medium-sized backbench is better than a very large one.
I think most governments would take a large backbench over a one-seat majority as well.
Campbell Newman had a very large backbench. Look where that got him.
Yeah, well, he lost a few of them along the way, and then it all sort of folded away suddenly elections. Certainly, tonight has not seen the dramatic swing. I mean, in Queensland, when I sit here on the screen here, which people can't see at home, unfortunately for you all, but it shows you the seats falling, and it just colours down the page. When I was doing the Queensland election, those red seats were going down the page and beyond. It was very difficult to follow what was going on. It's much more measured here. The swing is 8 to 10%, and that's the swing seats that fall, a couple on a larger swing and one or two below that swing which haven't fallen.
Right, well, Gladys Berejiklian, I would like to say congratulations at this point, but I know if I do say that, you would say that the leader has yet to claim victory,
How
so you're
did
not
you
going
guess?
to.
That's
I don't know,
exactly
maybe
what
I've done this once or twice before.
Perhaps that is exactly what I would say, but as the night goes on, I'm feeling more and more happy about what I'm seeing. But obviously, can I say at the outset, it's always sad to see colleagues lose their seats, as I'm sure Carmel's been in that situation, and I know some members in seats have worked their guts out for 4 years, and that's never pleasant to watch that. But I'm feeling very buoyed by a number of areas where we're actually seeing a swing to the government, which under these circumstances we had not anticipated. And that to me says that hard-working local members with a phenomenal leader like Mike Baird gives a positive result to a government that had a very courageous and some would say risky strategy front and centre in our election platform. But I think much of the electorate is appreciating that honesty. We've had that conversation with the community. We've asked for a mandate. And I would argue if we win more seats than the Labor Party tonight, if we get a majority in the Parliament, we've earned that mandate, and that's something I feel very strongly about.
Mike Baird has campaigned a lot in the seat of Granville. We've seen that going. Before we came on, you were talking about Granville. You seemed more confident about hanging on to it. Why do you think it's gone? And also Campbelltown, you seemed a bit more confident.
From the figures that I'm seeing, the Christian Democrat candidate in Granville has done very well to get into double digits, and that is taken away from our vote. So obviously there hasn't been to date a strong preference from the Christian Democrats to the Liberal Party, and that has affected our position there. But Tony Issa did very well to hang on as much as he did. But if you combine the Christian Democrat vote with our vote, that would have given Labor a very strong run for their money. But obviously I think that's been a factor which hasn't played out in other seats.
Carmel Tebbit, earlier this evening we heard Michael Egan, a former New South Wales Treasurer, saying that you should respect the mandate that the coalition does have on polls and wires, given this was front and centre in the campaign. If they do win, surely they have a right now to try and proceed with that.
Well, Michael Egan has a long-established and well-known position on power privatisation, but it's not a position that is shared by the majority of people in the Labor Party. We have taken a position to the electorate. Now, the way our democratic system works, every government has to fight in the upper house to be able to get their legislation through, and that is what will happen on this occasion. We're not going to let down the people that we've promised that we will oppose power privatisation. And so our leader's been very clear on that, and if the coalition are to pursue that policy, they'll have to fight it out in the upper house.
Wind it forward though, at some stage you are a party of government, you will be back in government again, you will campaign on issues that are important to you, and you will claim when you are elected that you have a mandate to do things.
We may well do, but we will have to fight for that mandate in the upper house, as we did during our 16 years in government, and as the coalition has had to do.
You mentioned the upper house. We heard Anthony before talking about the No Land Tax Party. It had the donkey vote. Do either of you know much about the No Land Tax Party and their policies and where they stand on privatisation?
Well, all I do know is what I saw today. They had an extremely strong presence. They had a strong presence on all the booths, and they had paid each of their workers. So some of their workers weren't very enthusiastic when they were handing out brochures. They weren't quite sure what to say. But there's no doubt that single-issue parties like that are something to watch in the future, and we have to take that into consideration. I'm pleased so far with the primary vote holding up for the coalition. If that trend continues, we could win that extra spot in the upper house, which will make a huge difference. So I'd be interested to see as the night goes on, if that primary vote that Anthony had up on the screen a couple of minutes ago holds, I would be feeling quite positive about us getting that extra upper house.
Yeah, it's pushing
position.
towards 46%, which would mean that you probably would get that
exactly.
position. You won't know
That would mean
tonight, though.
So that would mean that Fred Nile would hold the balance of power?
That would mean that we'd be able to work with the Christian Democrats to get legislation through the upper house, which would be absolutely critical.
And he's put conditions on it, but he's very open to negotiations. They're not very tough conditions.
Look, he's someone that has always had a very strong working relationship with the coalition, and we'd be very pleased to sit down and negotiate our position with him if it came to that. And it looks like if those figures hold, that we will get that critical extra spot, which obviously for us would be a phenomenal thing to achieve.
OK, well, we've been saying since the beginning of this broadcast that you would have expected to see some sort of large swing back to the Labor Party this evening, given what happened in 2011, where they had an historically low vote. But in this evening's proceedings, we've seen some seats swing to the coalition, Bridget.
Yes, we have. And let's take a look at some of those seats. And Tamworth is one of them, and that's held by the Nationals' Kevin Anderson. And the independent Peter Draper was trying to have another go at that seat. And there was lots of talk that it might go to the independents because of issues of coal seam gas, and also, Anthony, about the coal mine, Shenhua coal mine in that region. But what are we seeing in Tamworth?
Well, we're seeing nothing like that in the results. Kevin Anderson will be returned. We're measuring this contest the same as it was last time, independent versus national. Kevin Anderson, 55, Peter Draper, 33. We've got preference counts in 21 of the 37 booths. There's a 5.3% swing to the National Party. So Peter Draper, having lost the seat in 2011, his vote has gone backward at this election. His first preference vote is down. His vote after preferences is down. So Kevin Anderson has been easily returned in Tamworth.
And Drummoyne, John Sidoti, the Liberal, it was always a safe Liberal seat, but what are we seeing there?
This was the seat John Howard tried to win back in 1968, and he might have had a very different career if he'd won the seat. So, look, this was a Labor seat from 1962 right up to 2011 when John Sidoti won it, and he's had a terrific result at this election. There's a swing to the Liberal Party, 2.2%. This was a seat which looked remarkably overinflated for the Liberal Party. But the one thing to say about Drummoyne is, if anybody who knows Sydney, there are so many new high-rise apartments and big complexes developed in old industrial areas in that electorate. So Drummoyne is a seat that's changing dramatically in recent years demographically, and it looks like that's now finally being reflected in the politics of the electorate.
And the seat of Auburn, of course, that Luke Foley's he's going for. It looks like Luke Foley's now in the lower house.
Yes, and Barbara Perry, the retiring member, she was leaving at this election, was under pre-selection contest anyway. As we see here, Luke Foley's well ahead in 44.5 from Ronnie Owick, the Liberal Mayor of Auburn, who's running as Liberal candidate. And there's we haven't got a lot of the polling places in, so this may be a little bit too much. There's a 1.8% swing. My newer figure is 0.4. So there's been very little change. That may reflect Barbara Perry retiring. That may reflect some of the unhappiness that it wasn't a long-term local running in the seat. But certainly, I mean, it's no difficulty. Labor's held Auburn, no difficult at all.
And to the Northern Tablelands, the New England district in the north of the state, Adam Marshall, the National there, only since 2013 in the by-election.
Yes. Now, this is, he's actually, yes. Oh, no, I've got the wrong seat. Come on, North Shore. Northern Tablelands, you can see that's 64.4%. He's been easily returned in that electorate. Labor, 16.4. I haven't got my computer in front of me on this at the moment, so I'll move on to the two-party preferred penny. So 0.4% swing. It's a very safe National Party seat. He won it at the by-election with the retirement of Richard Torbay, so that's an easy victory for him. One other good bit of news at the moment for the National Party is at this stage they're still ahead in Monero. We've had a number of polling places from Queanbeyan in, and it looks like that the National Party will hold Monero at this stage, so that's a terrific result for them. And also just on that, that means two MLCs who've tried to enter the lower house of this election, Penny Sharp and Steve Wan, may miss out on being elected to the lower house.
OK, look, I'm just getting word that the Labor Party has conceded the seat of Newtown. We'll come back to that in just a moment, but let's stay in Sydney. In fact, Sydney itself that's being contested again by an independent.
That's right. That's Alex Greenwich, who is standing by. We're going to cross to him in a moment. But first, let's just take a look at that seat of Sydney. And Anthony, how is it going tonight for Alex Greenwich?
Well, it was weakened for the independents in the redistribution because Clover Moore's old base in Surrey, lots of it was removed and added to Newtown. But Alex Greenwich has easily won this seat. He's got his vote above 40%, which he did at the by-election. Hasn't been the normal case for an independent to get 40%. Even Clover Moore struggled to do it most elections, although she was always led on first preferences. Alex Greenwich on 44, 42.7 to 57.8. That's a 7% swing to the independent, and Alex Greenwich has easily been returned as a member for Sydney.
And Alex Greenwich joins us now. Alex Greenwich, thank you for joining us and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yes, tonight Sydney has again declared its independence.
And why do you think that, or how have you increased your vote?
You know, I've worked really hard with my community to represent them and to work for them, not for a political party, and that's obviously been reflected in today's vote. You know, I think also people are looking for people who have a positive message to sell and who will work to deliver results for their community, and are really sick of the political party argy-bargy, which really dominates our state and federal politics.
Now, for the last 4 years, you've been a lone independent until you got a few people on the crossbenches, but in a House where the government had such a large majority. How difficult has that been for you?
Well, I haven't been a lone independent. I've had Greg Piper, the member for Lake Macquarie, and also Jamie Parker, the Greens member. But, you know, you work hard. My job is to obviously work with the government but hold them accountable. And, you know, Sydney has certainly given me a mandate to keep inner city issues on the agenda and to fight for my local community, and that's what I'll be doing in the next 4 years.
You've had a lot of change, though, in that seat. The profile has changed quite a bit, hasn't it?
You know, my seat is a seat which is largely held federally by Malcolm Turnbull and is very much would otherwise be a liberal seat, I guess. But this is a community that is very educated, very clued in, and very engaged in politics, and they want someone who's going to work for them, not a political party, and that's obviously reflected quite strongly in this vote. I mean, we went into this election based on the 2011 result on an 0.3% margin, and we now have about a 7 or 8% swing towards us. So that's a strong win for independents.
You mentioned that people want positive things, but that is quite a significant rise. What do you think are the particular issues affecting the people of Sydney and why they've channelled the votes to you?
Well, I've prioritised keeping inner city issues on the agenda, and that includes new high schools and new primary schools for the electorate, which I've been able to achieve in my 2.5 years. Obviously, I have a very large LGBTI population, and so we've got overseas same-sex marriages recognised in New South Wales law. And, you know, a big concern of a lot of people is protecting local government. We saw the Baird government halve the votes of residents in local government elections, and I'm going to fight to make sure that we don't have any more attacks on local government in the next 4 years.
Alex Greenwich, we'll leave it there. Your supporters want you to have a drink, I think.
Yeah, indeed. I think so too. Thanks so much, guys.
When you talk about demographic changes around Australia, one of the really interesting ones is that we've started to populate the cities again. Those of you can cast your minds back to the 1980s, the early 1980s, late 1970s. In fact, very few people actually lived in the centre of our cities. That's changing, and I think that's reflected in some of the votes that we're seeing now, particularly this push towards the Greens in the inner city. And speaking of the Greens in and around the inner city, Newtown, how's that going for the Labor Party, Carmel?
Yes, it looks like we're not going to take Newtown. That's a disappointing result, but not a surprising one. I mean, the Greens on paper, 4.5%. We ran a very strong campaign, but the Greens, through everything they had, they really have been focusing their efforts on Newtown and Balmain. We're trying to cover the whole of the state. It also was always a difficult seat because it took the very strong Green vote from the old seat of Marrickville, and it also took those bits of Clover Moore's seat, Chippendale and Surrey Hills, so a strong independent vote there, which has probably gone to the Greens. So it looks like we won't take Newtown.
And what about Balmain, where your party was born?
We're still confident in Balmain. It's still looking line ball in Balmain. I wouldn't call it, but I certainly won't concede it neither.
A big risk for Penny Sharp in Newtown because she was in the upper house and she was your shadow transport spokeswoman, and she's taken quite a risk to move. Do you know how she is tonight? Have you spoken to her? You obviously seem quite upset for her.
She'll be disappointed. It was a very brave decision that Penny took to run in a lower house seat, but it reflected her commitment to wanting to represent that community and to believing that she could make a big contribution, make the biggest contribution in the lower house. So I know she'll be disappointed, but she'll bounce back. She's a strong woman. Just disappointing to see that on the night.
Speaking of bouncing, Steve Wan bounced from the lower house loss to the upper house and came back down to the lower house in Monero to try and win that seat again. Do you have any word at the moment on how he's going there? I pull that on you, so if you don't, then...
No, I haven't got it. Haven't got any new update there. Londonderry, I've got an update. We look like we're holding on to London. We look like we're going to win Londonderry, so that's a good result. Interesting, Londonderry, Ballina, where we're doing well, and also Campbelltown, all seats where we had a community pre-selection, which does show that that's a new way of selecting candidates that is bearing fruit.
Greg Warren was the first, I think, wasn't
That's
he?
right, that's right. Greg Warren, Paul Spooner in Ballina, and also in Londonderry.
Gladys, you've been getting more and more pleased as the night's progressed.
Oh, look, I'm cautious, as you know, but...
I think you throw caution to the wind at the moment.
Yeah, I know.
Can you look at the seat of Willoughby?
No, wait for that later on. But
if it hasn't come up, I assume it's going all right.
Oh, I hope so. I haven't had any word from my people, so I hope... Thank you, everybody, if you're out there.
In breaking news.
No. But I think early on in the night I said that I'd be really interested to see about the Green vote and what's happening there, and I think that's something to watch in the future. I think... this campaign, in all fairness, the Labor Party has talked about what they don't support. They haven't really talked much about what they do support, and I think that's caused a lot of people to go to the Greens, and that could be a trend that continues into the future.
But as we see in some of your seats, you get a fairly high Green vote as well.
Absolutely, but ironically to the detriment of the Labor Party. So in a lot of our seats, you'll see that the Greens coming second. In a lot of what are traditionally safe Liberal areas, you're going to see, I think, the Greens come second rather than Labor.
But young voters, inner city voters, surely you want to appeal to those people as well as those who are in settled suburbs.
Absolutely, but it's not just younger voters. It's a lot of baby boomers as well who may not be Liberal voters, but rather than going to Labor, they're choosing to go to the Greens, and so that's a phenomenon to watch. And again, I'll be really interested to see if Anthony has any updates on the exhaustion rate of preferences. You know, how many people are just voting one, and how many people are actually indicating a preference.
It's a bit hard for me to know that tonight.
Okay.
So I don't see the ballot papers.
That's a question for another day. But speaking of Labor and Labor Party heartland, of course, the Hunter always used to be that for the Labor Party. And Bridget, how are things going there this evening?
Well, let's take a look at Newcastle first. And Newcastle's held by Labor's Tim Crackenthorpe, and he actually won that at the end of last year at a by-election, and the Liberals didn't put a candidate up for that, but they've certainly put Karen Howard up. I think she's a solicitor, is that right, Anthony?
She's former head of the Hunter Business Council. She ran as the independent at the by-election and got about 26% of the vote, a very impressive result. She's run as a Liberal candidate this time and got 34.3. Big Green vote. This would be an ultra-safe seat on those figures at federal elections. With optional preferential voting, it becomes a bit more doubtful. Of course, Newcastle has a big issue, which is the railway, and that dominates politics in that area at the moment. It's interesting to know whether the re-election of the government will change the discussions on how that debate's going on about the future of the railway.
And also Charlestown is held by Jodie Harrison, is the member, the Labor member there. How's that looking for her?
She will win that seat. It's a substantial swing to her. She got a big swing to her at the by-election, but there was no Liberal candidate. The figure has now been repeated at the general. She got 49% of the first preference votes. We're predicting the swing after preferences will be something like 23%. That's compared to the last general election. Andrew Cornwall had to stand aside, of course, as a Liberal MP, and Labor gained it at the by-election. So she's still the Mayor of Lake Macquarie Council at the moment as well.
And Port Stephens was held by Craig Bowman. He's retiring. He was a Liberal who went to the Independents. But it was a safe Liberal seat. How's that looking tonight?
As I mentioned earlier, the biggest swings to Labor at this election are in the Hunter and the Illawarra. And Port Stephens is on the edge of the Hunter. Lots of people who live at Port Stephens work in the industries of the Hunter. Kate Washington running at the second time on 47.5 to 40.9 for the Ken Jordan, the Liberal candidate. It's a swing of 19.5%. That's an enormous swing. and that's the whole of the Hunter has gone back to the Labor Party at this election.
And an update while we're there in the Hunter on Swansea as well, Anthony.
Yes, and this is where Gary Edwards was contesting. He's in third place on these contests with about 13% of the vote, which is an impressive count as a personal vote. But at this stage, Yasmin Catley will be the new Labor member for that electorate. And I'll just say one thing also. People have noticed the Green vote has ticked over to 3 seats. I've taken the preference count off in Ballina, and in Ballina now we've got the Greens gaining Ballina, seeing what I can do about Lismore as well. But at this stage, we're giving the Greens the extra seat at Ballina.
So that's the case, an outstanding result for the Greens and moving outside the city for the first time.
If they win Ballina and Lismore, that's 2 seats gained off the National Party.
And what does that mean for the upper house?
Oh, no, nothing.
Too early?
We'd have to wait. There is only about 2% counted in the upper house. I think come back in a couple of hours and there might be something worthwhile to talk about. Yeah.
All right, well, one of the seats that we were talking about at the beginning of the night was the Blue Mountains. Most of it's national park. The rest of it's clustered along a railway line that runs from Blacklands to Mount Victoria. And we were keen on it as one of the key seats, Bridget.
Certainly were, Chris. And Trish Doyle is standing by at the Lawson Bowling Club. We're going to cross to her shortly. Anthony, an update. I think by those cheers, we know what you're going to say.
Yeah, she'll be shushing her opponent so that she get all supporters to get these numbers up. This was a seat that Rosa Sage won for the Liberal Party last time. She had the second lowest first preference vote for the Liberals. There was an Independent, the Greens and Labor all polled strongly. The Independents got 18%. It's not there this time. The Labor vote is solidified. She's ahead on first preferences. There's always a significant Green vote in that electorate, and therefore, without a significant increase in her first preference vote, Rosa Sage was always in trouble in that electorate. So Trish Doyle is the new Labor member for Blue Mountains, continuing the seat's history since 1976. No, it's going against history because for once Blue Mountains isn't a bellwether because it's being won by Labor but without Labor forming government.
Just breaking in, Anthony, I understand that Luke Foley is calling Mike Baird at this very moment to concede, so we'll be hearing from the leaders shortly, hopefully.
Let's, though, first cross to Trish Doyle, who is in the Blue Mountains at the Lawson Bowling Club, pointing to her supporters. Trish Doyle. Congratulations.
Thank you. I still haven't had the phone call to concede defeat, so I still must say I'm cautiously optimistic, but feeling very happy.
You sound like Gladys here on the panel. It was always going to be tight. Both sides were saying that. What do you think it was that got you over the line, or that you're hoping will get you over the line?
It's been working with the community for the last 4 years. It's about listening to people. It's about the community telling me they would like their local representative to consult with them. So they want a member who will represent them in a loud and clear, strong voice, and that's what I will do. They have talked to me about protecting the environment. They've talked to me about TAFE education. They've talked to me about keeping public assets in public hands. So they've been very unhappy about the representation they've got, and I've been there to listen.
And how strong was the anti-privatisation sentiment in the Blue Mountains?
It was huge, actually. I'd say after education, after TAFE, that the issue of the privatisation agenda, not just privatising our poles and wires, but the privatisation ideology of the Conservative government really worried people. So, you know, cutting our TAFE system by stealth, and our nurses and doctors worried about moving towards an Americanised health system. So it's about that sort of ideology creeping through. People have been talking to me about privatisation and their concern for quite some time.
You mentioned the TAFE cuts. How much does TAFE affect people in your electorate there?
Well, I've worked ever since 2012 with our local TAFE campuses, with our students, with our teachers, on people concerned about what might be happening to the outreach courses, the outdoor recreation course. It's a huge part of linking education in with employment. So when they first started making cuts and people came to talk to me, it was really clear that they wanted to actually have an affordable, accessible and quality public education system, not to see public money actually sent off to private providers that didn't offer that quality.
Trish Doyle, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Winners are, as they say, grinners. And speaking of winners, Luke Foley has, we are told, that's the opposition leader, has called Mike Baird, the Premier, to concede. So we would expect that we will be hearing from the Premier sometime in the not too distant future. And of course, the opposition leader, and as soon as those come to us, we will go to them. And as you would expect, there are some very interested observers watching around the country today. Most of them, it would appear from the text messages that I'm getting, are Liberals. One Liberal MP, in fact, a minister from South Australia, saying this is a very strong result. And the federal director of the Liberal Party has sent me a text of his tweet, which you could all see out there, saying Foley has taken New South Wales Labor to its second lowest vote ever. Labor more unpopular than Barry Unsworth in 1998, 38.5% of the vote. Well, you would expect him to say that, wouldn't you? But I'm sure that Brian Loughnane and a great many other Liberals, federal Liberals, very relieved by this election result in New South Wales tonight. Another party that will be very, very pleased, the Greens, because of course Anthony is saying at this stage that they have probably 2 inner city seats in Balmain and in Newtown, and may well pick up Ballina and perhaps even Lismore. So Juanita Phillips is standing by with John Kay from the Greens in the upper house.
Thanks, Chris. I do indeed have a very excited and energised John Kay sitting here with me. Now, John Kay, you know that the Greens have taken Newtown.
We have taken Newtown,
Anthony
yes.
Green is also saying, looks like you've got Balmain and Lismore and Ballina also very likely. Possibly 4 seats.
Possibly 4 seats. Look, I want us all to stay a bit calm. There's a lot of counting to be done in all of those 3 seats. Certainly we have one Newtown. That's extremely exciting. Fabulous candidate, fantastic campaign, really resonated with the locals.
And it was one of the early results. It just came in like that.
Well, it's a big result. It's not. It's much. I'm the great cephalogical pessimist. I thought we were going to struggle much more, but we got it, and it's quite a comfortable seat. The other 3, we really have to wait till we get the final count there, but it does show that there was an enormous swing to the Greens in those key seats, the seats on the North Coast and the seats in the inner city.
That's such a fascinating story, what's happened on the North Coast, isn't it? That to think that the Greens are taking national seats.
National seats, yes. We bypassed the Labor phase and went straight to the adult phase of the Greens. Look, it's not surprising that really strong policies are 2 hot-button issues, TAFE and coal seam gas. The community knew that we'd been campaigning on those issues for a long time. Labor came on board with watered-down versions of our policy. But, you know, you've got to hand it to the community. They knew that we were genuine. They knew we were committed. We'd always been committed on those issues. And it was fabulous to see them coming to us. Again, I caution, I really want to see the final figures. But and I also should say, 2 spectacular candidates as well. So.
And what about the inner city? What are the issues there? I guess Newtown, West Connects?
West Connects in both Newtown and Balmain, in my door knocking and phone calling in those areas, came up almost every time. But also schools, TAFE was a massive issue, huge concerns about marriage equality, particularly in Newtown. And those ever-present inner-city issues of housing affordability and rents, certainly in Newtown. Jenny Leong was a staunch advocate for trying to get rents under control with a very well-thought-out policy. I'm looking forward to seeing her taking that into the lower house and really pushing that issue really strongly.
And the other main game for the Greens, of course, is the upper house. How do you think things are going to turn out there?
Oh, look, so hard to tell. We'll be waiting around for a week or 2 before the button gets pushed and we know, and there's a lot rides on it. Electricity privatisation, we hope we have a mandate in the upper house to say very strongly no to electricity privatisation. I'm counting Fred Nile and the Christian Democrats as voting with the government. So it's going to come down to those last few seats, whether we get the amazing Justin Field elected to the upper house or whether it's the last national
What do you think might happen, though, with Labor? Is there a possibility that now that Mike Baird has a mandate for his privatisation plans, that Labor might backflip on that in the upper house?
That would be a shocking outcome for Labor. It would possibly be the death warrant on the party, and I don't think they would be that silly. They were punished savagely when they privatised the generators and the retailers, electricity retailers, in the 2010-2011 period. The 2011 election, they were clobbered. Now they're saying to the electorate, we've made amends, we recognise that was wrong. If they show that atonement was indeed false, then you would expect not 1, 2, 3 or 4 seats for the Greens, but a whole lot more.
But on the other hand, I suppose they don't want to be seen as blocking and frustrating something that people of New South Wales have voted for.
Well, I don't know that the people of New South Wales have voted for it, and the upper house has a mandate as much as the government does. It's the people's house. It's proportionally represented. It has all sorts of people in it, and if those people get together with the Greens and hopefully with Labor and say no, then that's a mandate. That's a legitimate political outcome. And Mike Baird can't claim, in a bicameral and a two-house system, he can't claim a mandate based on just winning the lower house, with a big swing against him, I might add.
All right, John Kay, we'll leave it there. Well, I guess you'll be celebrating tonight.
A little bit, yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You're watching New South Wales Votes coming to you live from the ABC Election Centre in Ultimo, but what we're seeing at the moment is the Liberal Party headquarters in the Sofitel in the city. That's where they held the federal election. Well, that's where they all gathered. Now we're going to the Labor Party, which is at the Catholic Club in Lidcombe. Now we might stay there for a moment or two because we are getting word that Luke Foley might not be terribly far away. We were hearing first 9:30 and then we got word just a few moments ago that he may well be on his way within the next minute or so. So just to keep you up to date with where we are at the moment, the election has long since fallen to Mike Baird. Luke Foley has called and conceded defeat, and we are now waiting on the arrival of Luke Foley to give his speech conceding defeat to the party faithful at the Lidcombe Catholic Club, and then shortly thereafter, hopefully, we will go to Mike Baird, who will be at the Sofitel in the city, where he will claim victory on behalf of the Liberal Party. And I think the Liberal Party, you can safely say, Gladys Berejiklian is feeling pretty good about tonight's result, because the swing against you probably isn't as large as you feared it might be.
Yeah, the swing against us is certainly not what we had anticipated, and certainly not what it could have been. Labor's primary vote hasn't corrected to the extent we thought it would. So I think a few people in Sussex Street might be disappointed with Labor's primary vote across the state. They've lost a lot of ground to the Greens, and that's an interesting phenomena I think we'll watch into the future. But obviously we're still waiting to see the outcome of a number of our seats. A number of our colleagues are hanging on as well. And as the night unfolds, I hope more of them survive than what could be the case.
Carmel Tibbett, can you take us behind the scenes, if you would, for a moment or two? Right now, Luke Foley, Stratton would have had a speech ready, I suppose, feeling optimistic for a victory, but they also would have had some words ready on this kind of result for the Labor Party. So what are the sorts of messages that people would be talking about that Luke Foley would have to get across to the Labor Party this evening?
I don't think Luke would have been expecting victory. I think he was fairly realistic about what our chances were. And it was always about getting the heartland back, making sure that we're a credible opposition. Very hard to be a credible opposition when you've only got 20 seats. So I think he'll be wanting to send a message of hope to Labor supporters. We've done well given the short time he's been in the role, and there's rebuilding. There's a message for us in the Green vote, and we have to take that on board, and I think Luke will hear that. OK, well, while we're waiting for Luke Foley to appear, we'll go over to Anthony Green for a summary of where we are at.
Yeah, we'll do the chamber. We'll do the seats that we're giving away to one side or the other, that make up of the chamber that's going to meet after this election. At this stage, the definites we're giving are the Liberals on 37, Nationals 16, which together is 53, 32 for Labor, 4 Greens, and I'll come to that in a moment, and 2 others. If we look at the prediction, that becomes 54 for the government, 33 for Labor, 4 Greens and 2 others. I'll look at some of the new members that have been elected. I'll start with the Greens, if I can do them by party. No, it's not going to. Suddenly it's been working fine all night. Damien Tudhope, is the new member for Epping, replacing Greg Smith. Alistair Henskins replaces Barry O'Farrell, and Lenny Patenos wins the seat for the Liberals, and Mark Taylor has won Seven Hills, and in Terrigal. Let me try that again. Is it going to move for me? No, for some reason it doesn't want to move tonight. The Nationals, Melinda Pavey's moved from the Upper House to Oxley. Upper Hunter is the new member, Michael Johnson. If we look at the Greens, Tamara Smith has won Ballina, we think. Adam Guys has won Lismore. Jenny Leong has won Newtown. There's a couple of new Labor members, Luke Foley himself, Trish Doyle, Greg Warren, and my scroll function isn't working, so I can't go on with the list. I'm very sorry. But certainly it's a very good, comfortable victory for the coalition.
Absolutely. Look, we are just getting a few messages actually from federal Liberal people saying that it's restored their faith that you can actually carry a hard message. I guess the question that federal Liberals will have to ask themselves is why they're incapable of carrying a hard message to the people of Australia, where Mike Baird seems to be able to do it. And the very difficult argument that he had on poles and wires, and you would have thought that there was perhaps an easier argument to be had at a federal level on restoring the budget, Gladys.
Oh, look, firstly I'll say again, and I want to stress to Labor and the minor parties, that obviously the people of New South Wales are giving us a mandate to proceed with our policy position. We came very strongly on that reform agenda. Mike Baird laid everything on the line. We all laid everything on the line, and it looks as though the people of New South Wales have supported our vision, and I'd expect all other parties to support that mandate. But it has also restored my faith in the fact that courageous politics, when it's done for the right reasons, can carry the day, and that's what this has shown. It was a very risky strategy, a very courageous strategy by the Premier, and he's carried the day, it looks like, and that's restored my faith in being able to reform.
Just briefly, Carmel, I suspect that's not an argument that's going to carry much weight with the Labor Party.
No, just like I don't think Gladys will take on the mandate that we've got in Newcastle about the rail line there.
All right. Well, look, we've been talking about Ballina all evening, and this would be an extraordinary result for the Greens because they have won seats before at federal level and at New South Wales level in the city. Winning one in the country, Bridget, is something else again.
Certainly is. And in Ballina, Paul Spooner, who is the ALP candidate, is going to join us shortly. But let's just take an updated look at Ballina, Anthony.
Yeah, I should stress on these votes, Don Page has been the only member for Ballina since the seat was recreated in 1988. He's retiring at this election.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there because we are seeing pictures now of Luke Foley, who is at the Lidcombe Catholic Club, and he has called some time ago Mike Baird to concede defeat. He's now making his way to the podium there. And to his supporters, it is an extraordinary effort for a man who has really not been in this position for very long as leader, Bridget.
He looks happy, I think, Carmel.
He's probably just exhausted.
Thank you.
Well, friends, thank you very much. A little while ago, I rang Mike Baird and congratulated him for leading the Liberal and National parties to their election victory tonight. Friends, Mike Baird took over the leadership of the Liberal Party and the government when his government had entered very stormy waters, and he steered the ship to safety. He is a formidable opponent. He's at the peak of his popularity. He's also an honourable opponent. Right through this campaign, Mike Baird and I have both ensured that it was never personal. I want to thank Mike for the way he's conducted himself during the course of this campaign. He's a formidable and an honourable opponent. Can I also thank Barry O'Farrell for his service to our state? Another formidable political leader from the Conservative side of politics. Friends, a majority of voters have decided that now is too soon for Labor to return to government. I understand their decision and I accept it. But friends, the people of New South Wales have breathed new life into state Labor today. We have received 500,000 votes more today than we did at the last election. At the last election, we won 20 seats. At this election, we'll finish with a number of seats in the mid-30s. And a majority of Labor's lower house seats will now be held by new members. I am delighted that we will have 9 or 10 new women in the lower house of the new... Today the heartland has returned. Can I thank the people of Western Sydney, the people of the Hunter and the people of the Central Coast for returning to Labor today. It is an honour beyond words to lead Australia's oldest and most storied political party, New South Wales Labor. We've governed New South Wales for a clear majority of the last 100 years. We've achieved humane and civilising reforms that have made New South Wales perhaps the most harmonious, prosperous and fair society anywhere on earth. Yet a glorious past doesn't guarantee Labor any sort of future, and nor should it. Labor must be relevant to the here and now. The Labor Party must earn its future. And with this result tonight, we've gone from a rump in the state parliament to a real opposition. The coalition parties have made a great many promises in this campaign. They've promised a great deal. The revived and revitalised State Parliamentary Labor Party will be an effective opposition in this parliament. And I'm determined that we will also be a credible alternative government. So normal service is resumed in New South Wales politics. After tonight, we now have a two-party system again in New South Wales. We didn't after the 2011 election, where we suffered the worst defeat in our very long history. The next election, friends, is now winnable for Labor. I want to thank the people of Auburn for their endorsement of me today. In 83 days as both Labor leader and Labor candidate for Auburn, I haven't spent as much time here as I would like. Thank you. Can I thank a wonderful person, a person who is respected on both sides of New South Wales Parliament and loved in Auburn, our outgoing member, Barbara Perry. I want to thank my deputy, Linda Burney, our campaign spokesman, Michael Daly, Walt Secord, who travelled during the campaign with me, and all of my shadow cabinet and parliamentary Labor colleagues. Can I in particular thank my predecessor, John Robertson. The gains we have achieved tonight were made possible in very large part by the platform that John Robertson constructed and I've been able to stand on over the last 3 months. Thank you, John. I want to thank the party organisation, our campaign director, Jamie Clements, for the excellent campaign he has run, his team at the party office, Kayla Murnane, John Graham, our party president, Mark Lennon. Thank you to everyone in the party organisation for a first-rate campaign. I want to give a special thanks to the bloke who I rang on New Year's Day and said, well, if I'm going to do this job, I need you, my Chief of Staff, David Tierney. And I also thank all of the opposition leaders' staff for the great support you've given me through this campaign. Can I thank our federal leader, Bill Shorten, for all of his support. My commitment to you, Bill, on behalf of New South Wales Labor, is that this revitalised New South Wales branch of the Labor Party will do everything in our power to make you the next Prime Minister of Australia. I want to thank all of Labor's candidates, all of the thousands of Labor campaigners, our party campaigners, and all of our campaigners from the wider Labor movement. I'm proud to lead a united Labor movement in New South Wales. And above all else, I want to thank the people who have supported me through all my years in the Parliament, and particularly over the last 3 months, Edel and the kids. So friends, after today's election, we thank the people of New South Wales for bringing Labor back to relevance. We thank the people. I lead a revived New South Wales Labor Party. Friends, our journey of renewal and change must continue, and I intend to nominate for the Labor leadership. Under my leadership, the New South Wales Labor Party will be guided, above all else, by our timeless Labor values. A fair go for all, a decent life for everyone, a helping hand to those who need it most in life. It is the greatest of honours to lead this great party, this great Labor movement. Today has been a very important step on the road back to government in New South Wales. Once again, I congratulate Mike Baird and the Liberal and National parties for their victory. It's been an honour to lead you. I hope to lead you into the future and into government at the next election. Thank you very much.
New South Wales opposition leader Luke Foley there conceding defeat. At the very beginning of that speech, I thought it was something quite interesting. You always hear them give some sort of credit to their opponent. But what Luke said about Mike Baird was actually quite gracious. That he said that he had steered the ship of the coalition back to safety, that he was an honourable opponent, that it was never personal between the two of them. And then he went further to also praise the public service of Barry O'Farrell. So let's hope that in this election and in the years to come we might see perhaps a different tenor in politics of Australia, which is long overdue. He said the people of New South Wales were saying to them tonight that now was too soon for a return of the Labor Party, but they got 500,000 more votes than they had at the last election. They would go from 20 seats to the mid-30s. There would be 9 to 10 new women in their new membership. The heartland had returned, he said, Western Sydney, Hunter, Central Coast, and he spoke then of the history of the Labor Party, which of course goes back to 1891 in this state. And he said, but a glorious past does not guarantee a future. We must be relevant and earn our future. That Arump, though, had now turned into a real opposition. He said that the coalition had made a lot of promises, but the Labor Party would be an effective opposition and that it would also strive to be a credible alternative government and that the next election was now winnable for Labor. Carmel?
Yeah, this election has put us in the game for 2019. That is certainly the case. We have got new talent coming in. You can't underestimate how shattered the Labor Party was after 2011, and the fact that we have been able to rebuild in the way that we have and get this result, I think is a tribute to the resilience of our party, some of our great candidates, and the campaign that Luke Foley has run. And I'm certainly also pleased to see that focus on civility in politics. I think we've seen that from both Mike Baird and Luke Foley, and I think that's something that the community will welcome. Mike Baird is a formidable opponent. He's a very popular man. All credit to him.
Gladys, I think, sorry.
I know, I was just saying, but I actually also have to say that I think Luke Foley will be a formidable opponent if he's retained as opposition leader. I think one thing where Luke Foley has probably shined more so than anyone thought he would during this campaign was during the debates. He was very new to it and performed very well. And having seen him perform in the upper house and in parliamentary inquiries, he will be a much tougher opponent for Mike Baird in question time in Parliament.
Gladys Berejiklian, and I don't want to make too much of it because it'll all blow away like the grass tomorrow, like dry grass tomorrow, but it was an unusually, how can I say, gracious concession speech.
Look, I have to accept that Luke Foley's speech now was an extremely gracious speech from a leader, and traditionally you don't hear them espousing the virtues of their opposite number in such ways, and that's really commendable. But I do have to say that it shouldn't take anything away from the fact that we feel Labor did run a very dishonest campaign. There was weeks and weeks of what we thought was very dishonest and misleading campaign material. We still stand by that. I don't want to take anything away from what he said tonight, but it doesn't reflect, unfortunately, the actions we believe they took on the ground for the last 4 weeks.
Well, just on that point, with regards to electricity privatisation, I think what we did was we put the facts out there. But that's not the only issue we campaigned on. I mean, we had 71 policies that we released throughout the life of the campaign. We did have a positive plan. Now, we have to take on board the electorate's view. We've got a lot of work to do over the next 4 years. But it's simply not true to say that we didn't have a positive plan and it was just a negative campaign.
And Chris, I also want to add, I think, although obviously Luke Foley won't say this, I think he would feel personally disappointed at perhaps the primary percentage vote of the Labor Party. I think they did anticipate the correction would have been much larger than what it was. It has translated in them gaining some seats, and we always knew that would happen. But I think personally the Labor Party must be feeling disappointed at the drop-off on what they anticipated would be their primary vote.
Carmel, do you think that Luke Foley would be disappointed? He did look somewhat disappointed up there. You know, as you say, look, he's tired and he's at the end of it, but you were sort of expecting that number of seats?
The result is where our expectations were, certainly in the last week of the campaign.
All right. Well, look, we're just letting you know that we are expecting, of course, to hear from the Premier, Mike Baird, in the not-too-distant future. So as soon as we see him, we'll go there. But before that, let's go to Juanita Phillips, who is speaking to the Labor Senator for New South Wales, Deborah O'Neill.
Thanks, Chris. Well, Deborah O'Neill, we just heard Luke Foley concede clearly not the result that Labor was hoping for.
Well, you have to enter every competition of this kind hoping for a win, but in reality, this time 4 years ago we were talking about, did Labor even have a future? Could it continue to even be a party? So we had a realistic goal, and that was to achieve 30 seats, and we've certainly done that. And if we get to 35, we are a very credible opposition, and we'll be fighting for the things that Labor stands up for.
And we just heard just recently, Verity Firth looks like she's missed out in Balmain. That was unexpected. That was one you were hoping for.
Absolutely, and it's a real loss to us not to have Verity in our team at state level.
So what went wrong?
Well, look, I think a lot has gone right for Labor. We've actually rebuilt our party, and now we, as Luke Foley has just said, are a genuine opposition, and it's from that sort of position that governments do form. So in 2019, Labor will be back and will be stronger. I think we have great policies, particularly in the areas that touch people's lives. People are really increasingly understanding, particularly because of Tony Abbott's drawing of the lines, that Labor is the party that supports jobs, that supports education, and that supports hospitals and health outcomes for all Australians.
We had Michael Egan on earlier tonight saying it's time for Labor to get with the times and support privatisation. Is that a conversation the party has to have now after this defeat?
Well, I don't know. I think after Baird's victory, if privatisation of the poles and wires does get through the upper house, I don't know how much more there is to sell, frankly.
What other
What's he going to come up with for the rest of the money? That's that the state's going to need.
But surely there's got to be some conversations about policies.
Well, conversation about policy, absolutely. But we will be making sure that, as we did in the lead up to this election, that what we put forward as policy, and I think Luke did this very well, by putting our budget to the PBO, having it approved independently, these are the things that gives Labor economic credentials, and Luke Foley has absolutely achieved that in just 81 days. So,
well, yeah, it's a point worth making. He spoke about Mike Baird as being a formidable opponent at the peak of his popularity. Was it always too big an ask that Luke Foley could come in against a juggernaut like that?
Well, it's always nice to be the one who's anticipating taking over a leader at their peak, but we know it's a great mountain to climb when you've got somebody who actually is as good at communicating as Mike Baird is, and we have to acknowledge he's got that great smile, but let's see how long that lasts. There's a few hurdles down the track. We've got the ICAC report that'll come out in May that was supposed to come out in January. That's a government that lost 11 people in their first term, including the Premier. So let's just not forget those realities as well, and I think Baird with a reduced majority is going to have some challenges to face in this new Parliament.
And just quickly, I want to talk about the other surprising thing that's happened tonight. The Greens look like they've picked up 4 seats. They've gone from 1 to 4, and obviously Labor was hoping for some of those seats.
Absolutely, and we certainly will have to think about what we do without the talent of those people coming to the Parliament that we were hoping to be there. I guess things do change, and for the Greens to be taking seats from National Party, this is a very big change for New South Wales, but it does reflect in some ways the movement that we've been seeing at federal level for some time.
Deb O'Neill, I know you've been at the polling booth since 6 a.m. this morning. It's been a long day for you. Thanks so much for making the trip down to talk to us.
Thanks, Vanita.
Yeah, well, a great smile will only get you so far in life. There's one person I'm sure is smiling this evening, and that would be Tony Abbott, because I bet you that Deb O'Neill was hoping that she'd be able to say that there were some federal implications in this, and the federal implication at the moment is that Tony Abbott's feeling a lot more relieved than he was probably this time last night. Let's go back to the Catholic Club in Lidcombe, and Ben Worsley is there. And Ben, obviously that was a speech to the Labor Party about what they can achieve next rather than about what they achieved this evening.
That's exactly right, and that was the mood here all along tonight, Chris. The party faithful, the true believers here, as the seats were starting to come in, the reclaimed seats, I guess, from that massacre last election, the view was they were simply getting themselves into a position for next election, which doesn't make for a particularly great atmosphere. It was a rapturous response for Luke Foley personally. I think people were surprised at how gracious he was towards Mike Baird and how long he spent talking about his fair, formidable and honourable opponent, in his words. But as Luke Foley himself said, Labor in New South Wales has gone from a rump to a real opposition. That is really all anyone here expected tonight. Some are disappointed that those 12 or so seats weren't 15 or 17, but most here, I think their view was very much reflected by the leader of the New South Wales Labor Party tonight, that they are now back in the business of proper opposition, if you like, after the disaster of last election.
Thanks, Ben. Well, we are waiting with breathless anticipation for the arrival of Mike Baird to the Sofitel in Sydney, and Nick Dole is standing by there. Nick, and I'm assuming that the atmosphere there is pretty electric.
It certainly is electric. There is a real sense of excitement and certainly a sense of pride, and none more so with my guest, Mike Baird's father, a former Liberal politician, Bruce Baird. Bruce, you must be enormously proud this evening.
I am very proud. I think Mike's run a very good campaign, and it's sometimes hard to think this is a young boy I brought up and now he's the Premier. When did all that happen? But no, I think he's been true to himself. He's explained where he wants to go. He's unpretentious, down to earth, likes everybody. I think that's how it should be.
You once urged him not to go into politics, didn't you?
That's true.
Do you think that was the right decision?
Well, you know, at the time he was going very well in banking, a lot of money, travelling a lot. And, so there's a lot of pain in politics. Why would you want to do that? And so a year later, my wife said it's his passion. Just go with him. So that's what I did, supported him, and, I'm very proud today.
Like you say, there is some pain in politics, a fair bit of rough and tumble, and sometimes there's some dirt as well. And this campaign has had some bruising moments, hasn't it? Especially some of the advertising regarding the Premier, calling him untrustworthy. Is that hard to take as a parent?
Yeah, I kind of used to read it all and get keyed up. And Mike would say to me, don't read the papers. Just relax. Just settle down. Because I think as a parent, you take it much more hardly than the person themselves, because you think that's unfair, or that's wrong, or that's lies. But overall, we've had a really good result tonight, so I'm thrilled.
Of course, front and centre for the Premier has been his plan to lease half the poles and wires. It's been a very contentious policy. Does the fact that voters have given him the green light tonight give you sort of confidence about what can be achieved in terms of reform, albeit difficult reform?
Well, I think it does show that reform, even though it's tough, can go ahead in Australia. People said, no, the public won't take it. Well, the public saw what was involved, and there was some pain, but they were prepared to put up with it. They'd been too much in the traffic and waiting for trains and doing all kinds of things. And he just said, enough is enough, let's really make it happen.
Now, you're not just a father, you're also a politician, or a former politician with a lot of experience, so you know how these things work. A lot was made of the federal factor during this campaign with Tony Abbott. Do you think that dissipated somewhat throughout the campaign?
I think it did. I think it was no longer a factor, is my view.
Ladies and gentlemen.
I've got the wind up.
It sounds like Mike Baird is arriving. He's walking through the door now to a rapturous crowd. Let's take some of that in.
There you have the Premier and Premier-elect making his way in to that room at the Sofitel. 4 more years is the chant for Mike Baird. He took over, don't forget, from Barry O'Farrell at a time when you thought this party may well be on its knees and facing a much more difficult election than the one we're seeing now. Mike Baird has turned things around for the coalition. He took what was an extremely difficult policy to the election, that being on the partial privatisation of poles and wires in New South Wales. It was fiercely fought by the Labor Party. There was always going to be a bounce back in this election, but it's not as far as I think some in the Labor Party would have hoped. And that I'm saying, is down to Mike Baird as the Premier, who has an enormous personal following. In fact, on the vote compass that the ABC does, he has the highest standing that we've yet seen on that measure, and that does measure an enormous number of people across the state of New South Wales, much higher than any other leader we've seen before. So it all lies before him now, but this is a moment that he will savour for the rest of his life. And so will his adoring fans. Let's see what he has to say.
Friends, I love this state. And the reason I love this state is because of its people. And friends, tonight they have chosen hope over fear. We sought a mandate to make New South Wales great. And tonight the people of New South Wales have given us that mandate. And to them we say thank you. I want to thank Luke Foley for his concession. He did call me, and I want to thank him for that. He has been a tough opponent, and certainly I appreciate his gracious words tonight. And I also want to congratulate those new Labor members. There is no greater privilege than coming in to represent your community, and I congratulate them for that. Over the past 4 years, we have focused on delivering for this community built on trust, doing what we said we're going to do. And 4 years ago, I want to pay tribute to Barry O'Farrell and Andrew Stoner, who took us from opposition, took us into government, and have got New South Wales working again, and I pay tribute to them. And that's exactly what Troy Grant and I will do with our team over the next 4 years. Work for the people of New South Wales. Friends, we decided to be open with the people of New South Wales. And in that, we expose ourselves to a big scare campaign. And I believe it was the biggest scare campaign in state history. And as a result, we lost some good people tonight. And I want to pay tribute to them, those local members that had the privilege of serving their community. They did a great job serving their community, and I thank them for the incredible work they have done. But I have heard some talk tonight about Labor being back in the game for the election in 2019. Well, let me give you this assurance. In 4 years, we'll be back in those seats we lost, seeking to represent them over the good things we do for the people of New South Wales over the next 4 years. And I also should acknowledge, despite the scare, we have achieved tonight some swings to us. And we do welcome new members into Parliament. I want to acknowledge Mark Curray's swing in Oatley. Tanya Davies in Mulgoa. And the new member for Miranda, Eleni Patinos. And Mark Taylor. And I hope he can play cricket too. I also note that for the Nationals, they've run a good campaign, and it may well be an opportunity. We might see John Barilaro return back to government. Can I just put a couple of thank yous around? I want to acknowledge a man that's been by my side since I came into this role, and I couldn't do it without him, and that is Tony Nutt. He's done a great job on so many fronts. Certainly congratulate him and the campaign team. Everyone on the campaign team, you did an outstanding job. I want to thank all our volunteers, all of you tonight that are here. We couldn't achieve it without you. And I also obviously want to thank all of our candidates, all of our members for taking us to the position that we have come back to government tonight.
We like you, Mike.
I also want to acknowledge the Prime Minister and his support. Yeah, he understood the need to put more funds into New South Wales. He has done that as a Prime Minister. I thank him for his support, his federal colleagues, and it's great to have Julie Bishop here with us tonight as well. In terms of my team, you know who they all are. I want to thank every single member of my team, but I do want to acknowledge three. That's my Chief of Staff, Bay Warburton. Nigel Blunden, otherwise known as the Wolf. Imre Salazinski. And every single one of them. I've relied on them, and look, together they might not be pretty, but they're pretty effective. Lastly, can I say that this journey that has brought us to this point is a family one. And I just want to thank my kids. Yeah. My father couldn't be prouder of his kids, Laura, Kate and Luke. I love them dearly, and to have them here tonight is very special. And lastly, I do want to acknowledge the most beautiful woman in the world, my wife, Karen Baird. Everyone knows that I am punching above my weight. So I couldn't be prouder to have Karen as my soulmate along my side, and I could not be here without her, so thank you, family. Friends, we do what we say we are going to do. And to the people of New South Wales, I want to say this. I will guarantee that we will work every day for you to make your lives better. That's what this election campaign has been about. And that's exactly what we're going to do, and the reason we're going to do it is because I love this state. Thank you, friends.
Okay, Premier Mike Baird beginning his speech there as the re-elected Premier of New South Wales by saying, I love this state, something guaranteed to get you a cheer anywhere in New South Wales. It wouldn't get you a cheer in Queensland, but it's a good way to start an election win in New South Wales. And you see, he loved it because of the people of New South Wales who this evening had chosen hope over fear. He mentioned the word mandate. I think that's something that you're going to be hearing a lot more over the coming weeks. And of course, this speech was all about pressure, putting pressure on those people in the Parliament and particularly in the upper house who will have to make a decision over the poles and wires sales. So he says the people have given us a mandate. He then acknowledged his opponent, Luke Foley, and he said he'd been a tough opponent, and he did congratulate those Labor MPs who had won seats. He also thanked Barry O'Farrell, former Premier of New South Wales, and Andrew Stoner for the work that they had done. He said that they had been open with the people, that they'd exposed a big scare campaign. He spoke about what Luke Foley had said in his speech, that Labor would be back in 2019. He said, well, we'll be back in 2019 and the seats we lost because of the good things that we will do. He mentioned also that there were some swings to the Liberal Party in New South Wales. He said the Nationals had a good campaign. He mentioned specifically Tony Nutt. Now, Tony Nutt is the New South Wales director. There is some talk that Tony Nutt may be being called back to Canberra to work in the Prime Minister's office. I'm sure Mike Baird would like to have something to say about that, although he is an extraordinarily good political operative, as he has proved through the course of this campaign. And Mike Baird finished by saying, we do what we say, and we guarantee the people of New South Wales that we'll work every day to make your lives better. So, mandate, I expect we'll be hearing a lot more, Gladys.
Absolutely, Chris, and it's great to hear the Premier tonight in his acceptance speech really finishing off where he started, and that's saying he loves New South Wales. He made a very courageous decision, we all did, in terms of what we campaigned on, and we have received that mandate, not for any other reason but because we believe it's the best thing to do. We want to see those rail lines, those roads, those hospitals, those schools built for the future, and we now have that chance, and it is a very humbling experience to be led by someone as inspiring as Mike Baird, but also to get that support from the community.
He also thanked the Prime Minister for his support, and of course your state will benefit if you can get this sale through from the asset recycling program that the federal government is pushing.
That is, we're estimating about $2 billion from that program, which we've factored into the $20 billion we expect to have during the course of that process. And it is a very exciting night for New South Wales because it means that a government, a leader in Mike Baird, who has a very courageous strategy, one which came with risks, can win the day if you do it with honesty and integrity. And I think that is a clear, resounding message that we've received today.
And I'm pretty sure the debate over mandate has begun already on this panel, Carmen.
Indeed it has, indeed it has. And congratulations to Mike Baird and the Coalition. It's an outstanding result. Congratulations to Gladys. But on the mandate issue, we have taken a position and we will be following that position through. That's what our supporters would expect and that's what we'll be doing. People want to see honesty in politics.
It's going to be very interesting for me to cover over the next 4 years. It certainly won't be boring because, as you say, that word mandate is going to come up time and time again. But Gladys, just on that, you were talking about Mike has gone to the election with a very risky political strategy, and we've talked about that tonight. But there is, not all leaders could do it. Do you?
No, I completely agree with that. We had all the ingredients that you really need. We had a very popular Premier, but not just a popular Premier, a capable Premier, a Premier who's demonstrated in his 4 years in government that when he says he's going to do something, he does, whether he was the state's treasurer or whether he's the party's leader and the state Premier. And I think people believe him because he has done everything he said he would, and that will augur well for the next 4 years. And we do know that we have some tough challenges ahead of us, but we also know that we carry with us the support of the community. We were upfront, we were honest, we were direct. We had to contend with what we believe to be a very ruthless and at times dishonest campaign by our opponents. And notwithstanding that, Mike Baird's popularity has won the day.
Surely if there are federal implications about this, the implication is about leadership. We've seen two campaigns, one in Queensland, one in New South Wales, where both governments were going with privatisation plans. The one in New South Wales succeeds. The one in Queensland is an absolute shocking failure, Carmel, because of the nature of leadership in that state.
Yes, and I think what we've seen in New South Wales is just how important character is to leadership. Mike Baird is someone who, no doubt, the community were able to relate to, trust, and it stood him in very good stead. He does face some challenges over the next 4 years, not the least being how he's going to find the recurrent funds to fill the hole if he gets his electricity privatisation through, because that's going to hurt our health system, our schools and other frontline services. Big challenge.
What do you say about the more negative campaign that the Coalition says that Labor ran, and some of those dishonest and you know it's been there's been lots of studies and facts done on it that prices won't go up under poles and wires?
No, I think our campaign was presenting the facts. First of all, we said that it would have a negative impact on the budget, and that is true. There will be a loss of recurrent funds. We said on prices that South Australia has the highest residential prices, and that is true. That is true, and that is under a privatised system. So what we were presenting were strong arguments in favour of the position that we were putting to the people of New South Wales. We're entitled to do that in an election campaign. It's a contest of ideas. Now, we accept the result. Mike Baird has had success with his policy. That's the outcome. But we are still entitled in the upper house to exercise the votes as they've been elected.
Gladys, I'll let you have a word before we go to Anthony to get some results.
Yeah, look, I just feel that we have been given a mandate tonight. That's clear, and we'll obviously be arguing that. And just on a personal note, Chris, politics aside, it's Carmel's last day in her job, and I just wanted to congratulate her on her career and wish her well for the future.
Thank you.
I was going to leave that to the end, but can I say that... Well, no, that's fine. let's do it now. And can I say that people don't often thank politicians for their service in public life? It is an extraordinarily difficult job to do. It is done under pressure from completely unreasonable journalists quite often, and sometimes a public that doesn't always see the good that you're trying to do. So thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. Thank you.
No worries, and I hope you get a break.
Honour and a privilege.
Well, I hope you get a holiday at some stage.
I intend to.
All right, well, let's go now to have a look at the state of the state with Anthony Green.